No one wants to do that. When you sit down with your 500K check from YC or whatever, you don't write that in the scope.
In this episode, I'm joined by Ian Jennings, founder and CEO at TestDriver.AI. They're redefining QA and automated testing with AI. Ian has been working in developer experience for more than 10 years. He co-founded hackathon organization platform Hacker League, acquired by Mashery and Intel, before spending 6 years at PubNub building developer products and establishing their developer experience strategy. Hey, hi Ian, thanks for joining me on the podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Awesome. We got introduced via Stephen from PubNub. He
Mm-hmm.
was one of the guests earlier, and I'm glad he introduced. Happy to have you here. And we spoke earlier. Let's maybe dive into a little bit of your background. I know you started with hackathons.
Yeah, I actually started coding when I was 13. My dad ran a website called bootdisc.com, like an old kind of utility site. You could call it a developer tool now, although of course that didn't exist.
Yeah.
And so when I went to college and found hackathons, it was amazing because it was a whole community of developers who I hadn't really met before. Right, back in that was 2008 to 2012. It was still kind of like you didn't want to talk about coding and in public because it was so nerdy. And so hackathons was this awesome community where I kind of found all these people who had also been like, secretly coding together. And it was like a, place for us to all meet. So I got really involved and it was so early that they didn't really have any of the infrastructure. And yeah, that's where I got to start. Yeah. So um, this is even before colleges had their own hackathons. So
Hmm.
I was working at Rutgers and a professor invited me to go to a hackathon called Hack NY. And it was the first ever Hack NY hackathon. They've been doing them now for 10 years. Um, and I entered and I prepared and I was super into it and I actually won that hackathon and it was awesome because I was super validating. So got involved with the community and I don't remember when the next one was, but I won the second one too.
Hmm.
And then by then I was just like super involved in the Hack NY community. I did their summer internship program. And I think by like the third or fourth hackathon, Hack NY, and then some of the colleges that started having them, I realized that there was no, every time there was no like way to see what other people had built at hackathons. Every time that you would go to a hackathon, you would kind of make something, you would send it in a Google form, it would go into a spreadsheet somewhere, and you'd never see it again.
Yeah.
You wouldn't see anything else anyone had ever made. Sometimes, like maybe if you went to the bathroom during demos, you just would never see it again. And there were cool projects, like sometimes stuff you want to show to your friends the next day. And that's when we came up with the idea with Hacker League, which was kind of after Major League Baseball, right? Like, what's the Hacker League? Like, what's who's the kind of make it into the competitive thing.
Hmm.
And yeah, I started that with a couple friends, and we actually got Hack NY to use it at the first gig. So I think like a week before one of their hackathons, we said, "Hey, we have this idea. If we build it in this week, will you use it?" And they said, "Oh yeah." So I got a couple friends. We like stayed up all night for like a week and built the first version of Hacker League.
And did you start monetizing that product, or that was purely a fun project?
No, we never monetized it. We really should have.
Hmm.
We didn't really understand business at all. I mean, we were students
Yeah.
and like sophomores and juniors.
Yep.
I think we had tried a couple times, but it was also hard because we really love the developer community. I think it was hard for us to charge. You see the same thing with musicians and stuff. It's hard to charge your uh, friends and community, but um, I think there's a business model there. I mean, if you look at DevPost or similar companies, like they're doing it. So I
Yeah. Yeah.
think if we had kept it going for free, we would have ended up in a place where it was the market was there. And actually, my old co-founder Mike Swift, he's now the CEO of Major League Hacking, which he's been running for more than 10 years, I think now. And that's that is a service model. So there's products behind it, but they organize and kind of officiate hackathons at mostly the college level. and that's a successful business. I think they have about 30 employees or so. So
Nice.
he really waited it out, and he figured it out later. Yeah.
And so he started with you, and then he kind of continued.
Yeah. So eventually we graduated, and we weren't making any money from it, and we said, hey, what do we do? And we all got jobs basically, and kind of kept it alive on the side. And eventually Mashery wanted to acquire it as sort of like a growth hack for them,
Hmm.
and they ended up getting acquired by Intel like right before buying it. So essentially, Intel was the acquirer because the deal happened to, yeah, exactly. So it was like Mashery on behalf of Intel, essentially.
Nice.
Yeah.
So that team is now part of Intel?
The Hacker League had no team. It was three of
Yeah.
us, and they acquired the assets. So
Oh, there's
there's no
no.
team, and I think they shut it down. Yeah, I think they eventually just shut it down.
Shut it down. Oh, too bad. Acquisitions, yeah, can
I
be
know.
good.
Yeah, I know, but it's been great. It definitely was a stepping stone, and I think a lot of us wish that we had kept it going. But it was three technical college student founders. There wasn't really, one of my Mike actually learned the business stuff on the fly, and again, it was tough to generate revenue at the time. So I don't know. Even if we did go full time on it, I don't know what we would have charged for.
Yeah.
Maybe like at the time, right? We were like, who's going to consult an 18-year-old on hackathons, for enough to pay three salaries, right? It just wasn't. There wasn't really a model there. And online hackathons weren't a thing either, which also evolved later. So if you look at DevPost, I think they survived on VC until the market was ready.
Yeah. Yeah, timing is so important. A lot of AI startups that came way before had to spend a lot more money to even arrive
Yep.
at the solution that could now be done pretty easily. Speaking of AI, let's talk about Test Driver. I know you've arrived at the product you're selling now after a pivot. So how is that? What were you doing before, and how are things now? What are you doing now?
Sure. So TestDriver is an AI QA agent. So it works at the desktop level, so it can see everything you do on the computer, and it can see, understand a computer, and interact with it. It helps engineers offload all of the QA testing to an AI, and it's been another journey to get there as well. We started by actually a consultancy,
Hmm.
and it actually there's kind of a gradient from hackathons and into this. So I said, kind of in the same hackathon thing, I said, how would you make money just working at a hackathon? Like if I just wanted my life to be a hackathon, how would I make money? And I realized that a lot of the developer relations people went to hackathons to understand how developers use the tools, right? They wanted to see developers using the products in real life. And when I was working at PubNub, I realized that there wasn't really any way for us to see developers using PubNub. And often I remember being in like a big conference hall with like 12 people and arguing about what developers wanted. And no one knew, and no one was asking developers what they wanted. And so it was just really interesting that we were all there was no data, right?
Yeah.
So I kind of put those ideas together, and I was like, yeah, PubNub really probably would have wanted to see some videos and of what the developers were doing. And so I started a consultancy where we recorded developers getting started with APIs, and the developers would just talk about their experience and log any bugs they found. And at that time, that's the time developer experience became a word, just like right. And I was like, oh, this is it. I gotta go do this, because same timing. It's like there's a word behind it. I'm gonna go do developer experience, and we called it developer experience testing because you have user experience testing, and then moved to developer experience testing. And that was great. We did a lot of deals, and we worked with like companies like Amazon and SAP and Snapchat and Ring Central, and just like every big API company I could have thought of. I was like, I was there.
Hmm.
Um, and something that came up in that consultancy was this idea of like, well, even if we record 5 or 10 developers, right, and each developer takes 2 hours to code something, right? I mean, an average developer how long does it take to get started with an API?
Yeah.
So how we couldn't figure out a way to drill down into that video efficiently, and every time we'd have to review 10 hours of footage, which was like exhausting.
Yeah.
So I started making my own screen recorder, and we were able to see like when developers filed bugs. There's like a special button to file a bug. Oh, when did they file a bug, and what did they code, stuff like that, and it made it way easier to parse the videos. And we would send the client like this package, and it was like just a bunch of clips from when they filed bugs. Because what does a developer do? It goes, tries the API, hit a bug, press a button. So I said, wow, that's a really, that's awesome, but this product's only being used in this consultancy, right? It doesn't make any sense to be used in, like, why would I run this every day? I'm not going to record my screen all the time, right? Or would I? So basically started talking to venture capitalists and took what's called an inception round from Boltstart to build that out and see what would happen if we got developers to record their screen all the time and report the bugs. So yeah, that was the initial idea, and we did that. We got far, and when we looked at the data after about a year of building and marketing this thing, we saw that developers were using it for testing, which was cool. But it was interesting was like, okay, like we knew that developers would use it for testing, but the other question was like, wait, why are developers still testing? I thought automated testing was here to stay, right?
Yeah.
So, and also like I thought QA people did testing. So why do we have this whole market of developers doing testing? Like, we kind of expected that, but also at the same time we were like, wait, why does that exist? So we started talking to the clients, and they're like, oh, we're doing testing because it's so hard. We can't do automated because it's so hard. And or it's like we're doing a desktop app, or like we can't test the PDF generation or whatever it is. And so then we started trying to build something to actually do that for them. And right in the middle while we started building it, like literally, AI text had come out, and we're like, okay, maybe AI text can do something. AI video, AI images came out, AI image analysis. And we started doing prototypes, and it worked better than anything. We're like, oh shit, like this is the future of testing, because now we can do all this stuff these people we know that our existing market's trying to accomplish. And it wasn't possible before. So let's make something to operate the screen recorder. Basically, let's make a testing framework and then record all of the data the screen recorder was getting. Got log files and Chrome like Chrome network requests and console logs. And so we invented the first thing was called Dashcam, which was like to record the screen. And then we needed a driver, right? We needed like a test driver. So that's why it's TestDriver. So Dashcam became TestDriver. We flipped it around, yeah, and we couldn't have built TestDriver without Dashcam. But when you actually think about the value as the customer, they don't care. Like the recording and replay is assumed. You know what I mean? Yeah. It's the last thing that happens. The first thing you think about is, I want to automate this tedious process, right? And so it's funny because the thing that we were working on, putting our hearts into, is like an afterthought, but really it enabled us to work really fast and be pretty much first to market with this operating system based QA agent. There's only a few other ones out there, including Apple and Microsoft have their own, but there's it's very, very early, and we were, like I'm saying, we were already working on it. So you could call it a pivot. You could also call it a full product offering where we had half of the product, or like maybe the wrong market, and we moved into like a more cutting edge market with a full solution. So, and that's obviously, that's been doing great, because who wants to repetitively click things on the screen, right? Like nobody. So
yeah, nobody, especially if you have RFI.
Yeah.
So the initial service was a video summarization, right?
Essentially, it was like automatic video clipping of bugs. Yeah, it was like record. It's like a dash cam for your car. That's why we called it that. It essentially was recording, and then you would attach your logs into it.
Yeah.
And anytime your logs threw an error, it would like make a clip. Kind of like, we took the idea from gaming. So there's like Shadow Play and Metal.tv, and those games, they hook into the event streams of like Dota, or like Dota 2.
Yeah.
Whenever you kill somebody or get killed, I think that emits an event through I think through IPC. And so that would then record the video. And so we basically are doing the same thing, but for developers, where anytime that an error is emitted through Chrome or in your terminal, it triggers a video replay. And yeah, the desktop product has great retention, and people really like it and use it every day. But the thing is it's still a manual process, right? And so even though we're saving you those few seconds, like an AI can the AI we have now will not only do the testing, but it'll generate tests just by giving it a URL. So you give it whatever your homepage is, it comes up with 20 tests, runs them all, and then if you like them, it runs it every day or every commit or whatever. It's like that's massively more valuable, and it was like flipping it around made it so much bigger. And but Dashcam still powers the recording, like I said. So
Yeah. Yeah. And so the discovery of or the evolution of you moving from a recording service or just a recording service to now test driver, how did you stumble upon it? Because I remember you mentioning earlier you posted something online, uh, and people started latching on to it.
with Dashcam, we were basically talking to customers as much as possible, and by the time we had started thinking about, okay, what else is left here, right after we had made the tool, um, we started interviewing the users, right, to know what was going on, and started working with some closer, right, about like I mentioned, why are you using this? Why aren't you doing automated testing? That was just such a thing for us because you my one of the original hypotheses was like, is this for content creation or is it for me documenting something really quick? I'm thinking of doing something very different every time. But when we looked at the videos, people were doing very repetitive things. So we stumbled on it by talking to customers basically, and then the solution came through timing. I mean, that's the only thing. Like we were originally building something that was for that was very basic, basically image matching, and so we kind of by that time had learned to just ship things very quickly. And what we actually did for the original pitch, the kind of like this viral video that you're talking about, is we said, okay, like, look, before we build this, it's already been like a year of building this other tool. Before we build this whole other thing, let's see what else is out there. And so I tried everything out there. And I found something that kind of worked, and we tuned it. It's called Open Interpreter, and we tuned it to be testing, and we hooked it up to Dashcam and put it on the infrastructure and got it kind of working for a couple clients. And we're like, okay, it kind of works. When we did that, I also made a video and I tweeted it out. And I remember it was like date night. I went out bowling and it started just getting like 1,000 views every couple minutes. Every time I looked, it was just like 1,000 views higher. People they don't want to do testing, and this thing was able to test an app just by saying, hey, test this, make sure it works, make sure the onboarding works. So I think it was like some kind of desktop app install and launch, and it tested a couple things. But yeah, so that really validated it, and we didn't have to build very much. And what we did from there is we kind of went and onboarded clients to this tool, and it didn't honestly work very well. It wasn't deterministic, right? So it would essentially do a path, and then next time you ran the test, it might do something else. So that was V1. It was like, okay, and we call that exploratory mode now, where it's left to kind of explore and go make its own threads, and it goes, oh, hey, did I accomplish this? Let me do something else. Now we're a V4, but V2 was about making it. V2 was about making, first of all, redoing the whole code base ourselves, essentially. V3 was about making it repetitive because we had to move away. But what happened was this original Open Interpreter, they're very consumer focused. They're making mobile apps. They're not focused on making it deterministic. They're focused on operating system control and automation, and it just wasn't the right use case. And we either had to fork what they were doing or make our own. So we made our own. With their blessing. We had weekly calls with them at that point, or monthly calls. And so V2 was making our own implementation that worked about as well. V3 was making it repetitive, which required us to invent sort of our own syntax. We have a whole YAML format, and that means once it does an exploratory test, it will actually repeat that. So that way it's deterministic, and it kind of logs what it did like breadcrumbs, and you can run that back. And so it doesn't have the ability to diverge, but the AI is still invoked. So if something changes, it doesn't break it. Like it's not hard coding XY coordinates. It's still like, oh, I'm going to click on sign up. I'm going to fill in the information, but it's not. We like to say it's about 20% threshold for change in the regression mode. And then V3 and was about making it fast. So, and then V4 was about basically deploying it widely. And so that's where we are now, is in this, in this iterative process. And that's been about 9 months to a year, I think. Yeah.
And so between the consulting and where you are today, I believe we had COVID and the market contracted massively. How did you guys survive?
It was definitely rough. We luckily were small and really heads down. So it wasn't very like, we didn't have to, we were remote already. So there wasn't such like a return to office or any kind of thing like that. A really small team of, I think, maybe 4 people max. We work with a lot of contractors too. That's a big part of our strategy. Something I really believe in is that like there's smart people everywhere. The market contractions, that was tough because this is my first venture backed company, and the understanding of what was happening in the VC world was like, I had this pre-established notion of what's happening in VC, and everything shifted to where like I don't think venture even knew what was happening, and it took a lot of digestion for me to understand. Okay, well, what's the difference between when we raised in whatever early 2020 or 2020 was it? Yeah, it had to be COVID-19 is before. Yeah, so like early and now, how has that affected the market? What is that doing to the investors' appetite, and what do we need to show for a seed round? So understanding that took me a while, and something that eventually settled it was, first, I think the VCs figured out what's going on. And then I was able to talk to a bunch and say, okay, what are we looking for at a seed round now? What does that look like? And now we have, I mean, it's almost a meme as well, where it's like, $1 million ARR by the A round, and the seed round is this many whatever. And when we raised, though, it was like, the joke was that if you had 1,000 GitHub stars, you could get a couple $1 million. And so understanding that was tough. Yeah, for sure, to understand what was changing. And a lot of people, I mean, I've talked to a lot of founders. It's not something that's out there, but a lot of people struggled. I mean, a lot of companies shut down. You can see on PitchBook, a ton of companies folded. And luckily, our burn was low. We did reduce the burn, and we had to fire one person. That always is terrible, but from the perspective of these people laying off 20 people or thousands, it was kind of just like, hey, like we got to cut our salaries, and we can't afford to really pay anyone like a full-time salary for the of like the immediate future. So yeah, it wasn't great. But AI is like this whole saving thing now. It put us, like something someone said, like when we raised, it was like Loom was making $1 million. Loom was acquired for $1 billion by Atlassian. That was 6 months after we started, and our pitch to the angels was, hey, we're going to make Loom for developers, right? Loom is growing. It's got millions of we're making Loom and that was a really hot idea. I was like, okay, great, and we got awesome, right? 6 months later, COVID, right? COVID crashes. Loom's acquired. No one has any money anymore, or whatever. And my friend at the time, Orlando, my employee, he's like, he went to a VC, and the VC's like, look, what you're doing was great in like the 2010s, 2020, whatever. That was a great idea, but now you have nothing. You're not going to raise more money, and you better either make a business out of it quickly, or you're going to have to change what you're doing, because everything is AI now, and or revenue based, basically. And so it was just like, we're like, oh, okay, yeah. I mean, that's true. Like it was a great business for that time, but it basically just wasn't working in terms of like large scale. There's some other companies who have done similar things, right? With different markets. They've done it for QA or product or Chrome extensions, things like that. So it's basically, I don't think it's the wrong idea. I think it was the wrong market and implementation for that specific thing. But I still think there's still many users of it. And I think that the Dashcam may come back as like an AI co-pilot, or sort of a GUI for our now test driver, something like that. So the IP is still there. You can still download it. We still support it. And it's actually being used as well for non-test driver users to record automated tests on back end at Arc Browser, where basically they they wrote their own testing framework because there was nothing to test desktop apps. So they have their own, and so essentially, what's interesting is Apple has a solution for recording tests. Right, if you write something in Xcode or it runs in Xcode or Swift, you can actually it has Dashcam built in.
Yeah.
Windows has nothing like that, so they're using it to test Windows. And what's super interesting about it is two things. Is one, basically, Apple tried to hire me shortly after there was all this attention on Dashcam for doing automated testing. It was really interesting. It's okay, well, there's something there, right? If these companies need it, and then Apple's got a solution, Apple's trying to, I was okay, maybe they want to kill the possibility that's happening in Windows. The other thing is hey, if companies are, again, it's reinforcing that idea that there's an unmet need. If companies are still writing their own test frameworks, then there's a need for TestDriver. There's a need for automated QA that's more powerful than just the DOM, right?
Yep. And so, what's been your go-to-market so far? It's a big shift from the last business to what you're doing now. Easier sell, it looks like, because it's very
Yeah,
obvious for people that they actually need something like this. Um,
because it's mostly just network
hmm,
and going and finding these technical product people who are doing difficult things, making desktop apps, or we got a lead today that's making a desktop OS app across 3 platforms. It's how are they testing that? The go to market for now has been mostly about proving that this is a solution that's helpful to these people. Where we're going is unique because we're going to distribute it as an NPM module. So you'll be able to just NPM install TestDriver.AI and use it on your own machine. You can actually do that now. And we will be able to distribute it also with a GitHub marketplace. So you'll just press a button and have the AI in GitHub marketplace. So that's the strategy. I guess, yeah, there is something very cool about our strategy, right? But in terms of what's happened so far, it's
yeah.
right. It's very by the book. And I'm really excited about the future of this because every AI startup right now is book a demo.
Yeah.
Every single one. You can't use any of them, right?
Yeah.
Ours you can use. You can try it, and you can get access to it pretty easily if you apply to the wait list. We'll talk to you, and if you're the right kind of customer, it's live. It's working. It's generating tests. So I'm really excited about that, and I think more of these. I mean, I'd love to play with all these AI startups, but you just can't. I think it's because they don't work, and it's
Yeah.
kind of
Yeah, because the demo is easier
building
to
that idea
close.
that
Yeah.
nothing's real. It just keeps reinforcing that idea that none of this is actually real or working,
Yeah.
or it's people behind the scenes or whatever. So we're really focused on proving that it's real, it's working, and that it's automated, and it's I'm making videos every day now showing the workflows, things like that. So
Hmm.
yeah, I think that's really so. And again, the go to market too. I feel like I actually have a lot to say on it. Uh, we think that there's a marketing strategy here where there's a lot of testing, no code testing tools that are targeting product and they're targeting QA.
Hmm.
But I think the engineers are the ones who are slowed down by QA. They're the most frustrated. And I think that's why we see them do testing. And so we're targeting developers where a lot of companies aren't. They go, oh, you don't need to know how to write a test. You don't need to know how to write code. That's for product people.
Yeah.
You know, but actually, where do the tests live? They live in the engineering repo. So why are we giving it to product people, right? So, yeah. So I guess there's interesting stuff about the go to market.
NPM is a great source of finding new libraries to use. How did you stumble upon this route for you as a business?
Yeah, I wouldn't say NPM is the primary way to distribute the application currently. GitHub is more the primary distribution strategy
Hmm.
where you're going to I just add workflows, GitHub app essentially into
Yep.
your repository, and that's going to automatically generate and maintain the test for you within your repo. So you don't even need to do npm install. Npm is later. So essentially what happens is you add the AI into your application on GitHub. It runs your development app, whether it's a website or desktop app. It clones it down onto the VM, runs it, clicks around, comes up with ideas for tests. Then it opens a bunch of PRs with a bunch of different tests, and whichever ones you like, you can merge. And of course, it's not going to do a perfect job, right? It's not going to, not every test is going to work, and maybe you're going to want to test stuff it didn't choose to test. So that's when NPM comes in. Now that the AI has bootstrapped you and given you 20, 50 tests that you can get started with, and when you want to customize it, then you download the NPM module. And the NPM module is how you run it locally. You can run those tests on your own machine and edit them and kind of basically like build more tests, right? That's so we went that route, I think, because we're looking at GitHub and NPM. They're the two biggest, right? Those are huge networks. JavaScript's the most popular language. Everyone has NPM. GitHub is obviously the most popular place. Kudos to Microsoft for purchasing both of those or whatever, but that's why we're going all in on developers, and we think developers have the most pain, and so it's like, how can we make it the easiest way for developers to offload that pain and the most accessible? So how can we reach all of those developers who are struggling with testing? Yeah.
Do you think desktop is making a way back?
I honestly, I am. We chose desktop and have been dying on the desktop hill because of early, so if you go back to this kind of 1,000 GitHub stars funding cycle, right?
Yep.
What did we get? We got a ton of desktop apps for developers. Right? We got like Wave Terminal, Hyper Terminal. We got what's that other one?
Fig.
There's got like
Fig got
5 terminals.
Yeah,
Fig Terminal. There's another one I can't even think of. It's another 4-letter word, I think. Then we got CoScreen desktop app. We got like GitDuck. I think that's another. We got VS Code came in there somewhere. There's a bunch of other IDEs like Cursor's out there. OpenAI made a desktop app. Notion made a desktop app. Slack is on. It's like everyone's on desktop, but no one's paying attention to it because it's hard and it's boring and it's like an afterthought essentially.
Yep.
But the way the web is going is it's getting more and more closed. Like I can't even embed an iframe anymore. Like all the privacy stuff, you can't have an iframe with cookies anymore. Like the web is becoming locked down like iOS, like basically like an iPhone is. While the desktop is like open and you can RMRF star.
Yeah.
The whole desktop.
Yeah, you have full control. Yeah.
So and then the other thing too about desktop is, I know this from PubNub is, PubNub is, when I worked there, it's focused on integrating computers. It's computer to computer networking. And it's also client to client. So we would always have to have 2 tabs open to test PubNub, right? Because it was a network connection between one and another. And that doesn't work in Playwright or any automation software. So there's what I'm trying to say is, again, back to APIs. If you look at integrations, right? Mm-hmm. Like an API is a computer to computer language. You like the APIs in the browser are getting locked down. And so to have full integration where you're actually allowing the AI to interact like a human, right? Or like do things a human would do, you need to be at the desktop level. Desktop is where everything merges, right? That's the largest outer context that's provided to you. The web is easy and it's deterministic, and that's why we've chosen. It's not because it's powerful. And when you look at what's possible on the desktop, not only are we talking about desktop apps, even if we're testing websites, we can do third-party auth, right? So all of automations now, they're doing mocking. And if I'm mocking something, what am I testing?
Yeah.
Nothing,
yeah.
So mocking endpoints, mocking auth, that's dumb. It's not what a user does, right? It doesn't give you confidence. PDF generation, right? So like if I generate a PDF, how do I test the output in Playwright? Canvas, iframes, video tags. What if I'm in dark mode? Maybe you can do that in Playwright. I don't know. Clipboard. What if how do you test that Chrome is showing the desktop notification permissions thing?
Yeah.
When you make a desktop notification, right? Is all this stuff. What if I have accessibility? What if I have Zoom at 150%? What if my screen is a 1024 by 768? Like does it show a desktop notification? It's just like, oh, how do I do my file system? How do I upload a file system? How do I test that, when I export from Figma and I import it into VS Code, that works, right? So who's signing up for TestDriver? It's like people making VS Code extensions, right? How do I test that? How do I test a Chrome extension that's modifying a third-party page? Like there's just and those aren't like edge cases.
Yeah.
That's the internet. Like that's what users do. And I think that I think the browser as the final app it's real. I mean, obviously we're spending a lot of time there, but if the browser was the final app, a Chromebook would be successful.
Yeah.
We'd all have Chromebooks, right? There's a reason we don't have Chromebooks. So, that's what we're doing on desktop. So it's not really about desktop apps. It's about having an AI work like a human in the same content, in the same shared space where humans work. So if we look in 10 years, if we still have, we're still using computers that are physical, the desktop will still be there and the AI will be helping us there. And so that's why we see, Microsoft is putting a Copilot key on the keyboard, right? It's not in the software, it's on the keyboard because the keyboard is in my world a layer outside of the desktop context, right? It's larger than the and so we're looking at the outer context.
Yeah.
And I could just rant about that forever because I think about it so much.
Yeah, I think
Because everyone wants to know.
yeah. Browser window, restricting things just to a browser tab limits the technology to be able to help the person who's working on a machine, and the extension of that is probably going to be, so in a way the screen or the machine is also a limitation. The extension of it is probably a AI robot sitting next to us,
Yeah.
like a helper. And
Yeah. I mean, imagine like the Tesla robot that you see, the humanoid robot, right?
yeah,
It will be able to sit down at the computer and then operate it, right? And maybe it doesn't even need to have a GUI, but if it does need to understand what's on the computer, like they're going to need the technology we're making, essentially.
yeah.
Right. And it's, of course, I mean, that's a very inefficient way to test software with a robot, but it's true. I mean, that's like, look, there's a whole world in here, right? I mean, we spend all this time staring at the screen because it has an infinite, it's just an infinite portal to like a million things. So there's, I think having an AI understand and control the same space we do, it makes the question funny, I think,
Right.
and there's skepticism of it, but to me it's like obvious, and I think that's why we have, why, and again, why doesn't Microsoft make a browser extension, right? Why is Apple Intelligence at the OS and not the browser level?
Yeah.
Right? It's like, why would you? I think people are doing what I think the answer is people are making browser based AI testing because it's easier and there's established frameworks, and we're doing something that's extremely hard, and we spent months on it with my friends who are computer vision experts to build this, to understand, because it's way harder.
Yeah.
It's way, way, way harder than that. There's we have our own replay mechanism, our own infrastructure for running the tests, our own AI to generate the tests, our own file format. Like no one wants to do that. When you sit down with your 500K check from YC or whatever, you don't write that in the scope.
Yep.
Right? It's stupid. So you say, what's the easiest thing I can do? And then we'll do OS later. But we're just in this crazy place where we've been on desktop and it just has aligned for us. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a very interesting journey. What are the few things that engineers mostly struggle with where we can apply AI?
I think the biggest struggle is three things. I think the first one is the complexity. So we've built layers of abstraction so far now,
Yeah.
where like something close to me is like CSS, where like
Mhm.
most developers don't understand CSS or how it works.
Yep.
The reason things like Bootstrap and Tailwind are popular is because they abstract away any of the knowledge that you needed to know about CSS
Mhm.
into this abstraction, right? And same thing with React or Vue. Like we don't have JavaScript engineers anymore, right? You have React engineers, and that's been something people have been saying on podcasts for 10 years. But when you start to not only take those complexities, but start to abstract things away into different services, like let's say Auth0 and Twilio and these different APIs. Now you're not only like having to understand your own system, but also this like another abstracted system and how that behaves. And then we have like microservices, and the desire of the customer has gotten to be so like complex, right? And basically had this idea, right? Everyone was saying in 2010s, minimum viable product, and that doesn't exist now because people are demanding role-based access control and these like very high-level things that are very complex things off the get-go, right? You can't even close a contract deal now without these like
Yep.
specific like OAuth and things like that. Whereas those would have been enterprise features in the past. So the demand for these like high-level goals has led to increased abstractions. And I think the hardest thing for developers is still accomplishing those goals, but also understanding how the whole stack works. So when something breaks, now I have to know, a full stack engineer has to know CSS, Tailwind, React, Vue, JavaScript, authentication, callbacks, microservices, EC2, all the whole Amazon suite,
Yep.
like caching, CDN. I don't know how anyone would pick it up without being in the industry for 10 years. I just don't understand how you would know any of this.
Yep.
Like it's and then the engineers that we work with have to understand desktop and the operating system, file permissions, all that. It's crazy. I'm so blessed with the engineers that are on my team because we do all of that. Every system encodings. I mean, video encodings, text encodings. It's crazy. I don't know where these people have learned this stuff because
Yeah.
it's not in school.
It's not in school.
Yeah, it's not in school. It's got to be. It's so I think that's the hardest thing is the complexity has gotten huge, and you can, the guy, what's that guy, Patrick, whatever, the guy from YC who's like, oh, start a company, whatever, and he made like bingocardcreator.com or whatever, that guy, Pat, I forgot his name, but he, it's like bingo card creator, like it's not possible now. It's bingo card creator with OAuth and a mobile app and all that. It's like not, it's a different market. So I think I think that's the hardest thing. And I think AI is the savior, kind of, right? It's like it can tell me it can kind of tell me like how to do OAuth right, or
Yeah.
refactor my thing or whatever, or tell me how the system works. And so I think it's going to bring some abstraction. Well, it's going to bring insight to the abstraction, I guess. But
Yeah.
yeah,
I mean, the general purpose solution that is already out there is helpful, uh, and then there are specialized solutions
yeah,
like Cursor, which is phenomenal. I love it. Um, and this episode is not sponsored by Cursor, unfortunately.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
um, but are there other gaps you see, given that you're already working in this space, problems to tackle with that engineers are struggling with?
Yeah, I mean, we are building TestDriver because shit breaks all the time. Like that complexity I'm talking about, the abstraction is causes things to break. And so if you're not like, I think a response from the web community has been to mock the abstractions
Yes.
and just say, we're mocking this. We don't care about uploads. We don't care about the integrations because they're untestable and unreliable. And then my philosophy has always been looking at the user, and it's like, well, if the user can't do it, then it's not even who cares what you're testing if it doesn't work, right? Or you can't validate it. It's like if I mock something, I don't have confidence in anything. So something, and it's kind of going back to the early companies we were doing is, in the first ever DX test I did as part of that consultancy, it was on a publicly traded company. We took 5 developers and had them sign up for this API, and 5 of them could not sign up because they had ad block. They had ad block enabled, and the market they were awaiting the result of a marketing analytics ping. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like a
Yeah.
request to just track the signups, and they were forced waiting on it, and it was getting denied because of ad block. And it was just like this like epiphany. I was like, oh my god, like how much money has this company lost because because they're not testing that,
Yeah.
and you can't test things in this like fairy tale padded garden, whatever you want to call it. Like
Yeah.
you can't make all of the things favorable to you and then test it and then say it works. You need to like degrade the network and add things that are going to screw things up and make it hard. It's hard. It doesn't, that's how things break. Like test on the worst machine. You know, that was something, I don't know if that's from the 90s or what. Like that was what people did in the 90s. They would be like,
It is from the
you know,
90s.
you
I
would,
remember testing on IE6. Um,
yeah, we used to have to test on IE6. Maybe that just made a generation of people who think differently. Because I remember working at a startup where like I think they said 25 to 30% of their money was coming from a client that everyone used IE6 for security reasons. And I remember designing CSS and JavaScript frameworks, and like there were just these crazy bugs where like
uh,
IE6 couldn't support more than like a megabyte CSS file, so we had to divide it up into 6 files or whatever it was. I mean, 6 megabytes is huge, but sorry, I got excited because yeah, you're right. It must be it. It must be this like
yeah, those were
there
the
must just be
times.
a new yeah, maybe there's just a new like everything's the latest, right? I don't care if it doesn't work
Yep.
on like it's got to work on the latest browser. I don't care.
Yeah, because everything
That's
auto
true. Maybe there
updates.
was
You quit
yeah.
Edge or Chrome and restart, it's already updated. VS Code, same thing. Yeah, more and more things are
Yeah,
auto update, which is, uh, I guess, CrowdStrike fiasco was probably a result of
yeah.
an auto update.
You know what it reminds me of too is the bubble effect of Silicon Valley, where like everyone's on the MacBook
Yeah.
M based computers.
Yep.
You know, I'm trying to look up what the share of the M based chips are, but like, I wonder what the share is actually globally. You know, like
Oh, I think it should be fairly low even now,
right? You would think,
but I think we've already created a bubble, at least business folks. We live on LinkedIn and Slack. We talk to similar kind of people. We
yeah,
consume similar kind of news. From an engineer's point of view, we've started slacking on cross-platform support because everyone is probably converging to some degree. But not
yeah.
all
It's
users are,
well,
for sure.
I that's been a tough one for us actually in product because we found the very similar thing
Hmm.
where like every CTO, you know, everyone like that is always on Mac, right?
Yep.
Like every Silicon Valley funded company is always Mac, but every developer I would encounter on Discord, any bottom up developer was always on Windows. And we've just been fighting this. Like, do we do a single OS or both the whole time?
Hmm.
And you're starting to see a lot of apps come out with Windows. Like I know Raycast announced Windows and Arc is I think also recently did Windows too. Like eventually you have to go do Windows anyway.
Yeah, you have to.
So it's it's been a back and forth and actually so recently we basically uh, dropped Mac. You know, we originally built our infrastructure on Mac for Mac runners because we're like we know Mac, like this is what people want. But we just actually swapped it for Windows and Mac is now an enterprise feature because Windows is so much cheaper and easy to get started. With Mac, there's all this dedicated hosting stuff you need to do. I mean, it's a whole thing, but
Hmm.
um, you have to pay something like $700 a month to have a Mac dedicated instance on Amazon, like minimum $700 per parallel instance or
Wow.
something like that. So um, it just was it
That's
just
how
was
they're the
getting
richest
absurd.
company.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I don't know about the convergence. I think the competition's healthy
Yeah.
personally, but I don't know. I think there's definitely a bubble, and it's again when you're looking at real world stuff, which is where I try to keep my focus. I try not to get bubbleized or whatever. Um, it's cross platform, or it's even Windows. You know, maybe it's just Windows. That's really what the market share says, right? So.
And so for you guys, is it a cross-platform code base, uh, or you had to build literally for two different code bases? And um,
Um, well, Dashcam is Electron.
hmm,
TestDriver is cross-platform, so it's not hard now to do Node.js cross-platform. There's some intricacies which I think took us like a little while to overcome in the beginning of like how do you do these things and what are the things that these operating systems are picky about. But once you learn that, it's pretty straightforward. TestDriver, the CLI and runners and stuff, there's no problem cross-platform at all. There almost was barely a thought. Infrastructure, of course, provisioning runners, the platform, that's tough. I think the strategy to launch on a single platform makes a lot of sense. I still want to be loyal to the developers, right? Who, it's annoying for me to release something and then advertise it to the community and only get a 10% conversion on that because those are the Mac people. That's my style, is bottom up developer, like developer community. And so I think it's hard for me to do a single platform when you're immediately just like irrelevant to 90% of them,
Yeah.
and then if you go the other way and you say, okay, I'm going to be relevant to 90% of them, well, then you're irrelevant to the 10% who are the influencers in Silicon Valley. So to me, it just became really frustrating, and it's why we went cross-platform. Yeah.
It makes sense to do cross-platform, especially now. Not doing cross-platform forces you to have two code bases. Engineering talent becomes a challenge. On the talent note, I know you have a small, tight-knit team. Any tips on building a good engineering unit?
My strategy is to hire excellent people and let them do what they want to do,
Jobs.
which doesn't work in business. And it's not do what they want to do, it's basically give them high level goals that are, like, I wouldn't say do what they want to do, actually. I would say trust them to make the right decisions
To figure it out. Yeah.
and believe them. I think, and give them autonomy
Mm,
where you can. So I try to give every employee the maximum amount of autonomy possible, like in terms of like security, where it's like, who can get an admin token and who can they get write access, stuff like that. Um, and the biggest thing I do is I hire for quality people who are excellent communicators and very fast. And typically we hire by just giving people some extremely complex exercise, which is usually onboarding. Just, hey, here's all the documents we have on how to get started, and I'll talk to you in a day or two, and see where they get stuck. Because we know the whole process, and just see, okay, well, do they need more guidance in that, or did they get to this really complex part where we know there's a gap, or did they get past that part where we know there's a gap? And you can kind of tell where they get, and at the end of that, they're onboarded already. And you give them something real to do, and then in 3 days, whether they're good or not. This whole code exercise thing. I mean, we could do that, but people copy and paste those, or they get their friend to do it. It's like,
yeah.
we don't do any of that stuff. I also look for portfolios. I look for people who have, you know, GitHubs, GitHub projects.
Mm,
And what are they? Are they forks, or are they full projects that they made themselves? If there's like tiers, right? You have
yeah.
no GitHub profile, well, I should go bottom. No GitHub profile, GitHub profile, forks, class projects. Then you have, right, like actual projects.
Yep.
And then you have like people who actually contribute to like popular projects. And I think, like, if they have actual projects or they tried stuff, that's that shows you a lot. And it's not even looking at the code, actually. It's just, you can't fake it.
Yeah.
You can't fake you can't fake months of commits. I mean, you can, but you can't really. Like, it'd be really hard to make it not look real.
Yeah. Well, I've seen people try to do that. Like,
People
have
fork stuff or
read me
whatever.
and
Yeah.
then just commit on read me's. But yeah,
Yeah.
it is harder. It is harder.
You can tell when people have it. And so that's the main thing. And then we work remotely entirely, and very few meetings. I think meetings,
Yeah.
the engineers hate communication. They hate meetings. They hate stand-ups. I hate stand.
I hate
I
stand up.
hate
Yeah.
stand-ups. So anything that I hate, I just don't do. I don't. I'm trying not to be a hypocrite. In now that I'm a CEO and manager, and so, like, okay, well, so we have stand-ups that happen in Slack where it's like, would just please write a couple sentences of what you did, so I can foresee a blocker. Maybe I need to get you that token or access today, or maybe you're making the wrong decision, or maybe you didn't make any progress, right? It's like, we don't look at lines of code as a metric, but you can tell if someone's making progress. I mean, if you're paying attention. And I don't think this will scale either. Like, we're a small team. So, like, if I had 100 people, I don't think this would be the way to do it.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah,
you'd have
you
to
can say,
have
yeah.
20 people like me doing it for each team. Yeah. So I can just keep talking about this. I love these questions.
Yeah, at an early stage, yeah, performance measurement has to be very, very different than at a later stage for
Yeah.
sure. Do you-
We don't have deadlines either. Basically, it's like
Hmm.
and that's a problem sometimes, but basically if people say when do you need it by, I say it's a startup, everything's ASAP.
Yeah,
I'm like, do it, do it basically everything. I'm not going to give you a deadline because
the
it's
deadline is
always as fast as
yesterday.
possible. Yeah, it always is. It's just always as fast as we need to be as efficient as possible. So there's no deadline. And also, like, if I'm giving you a ticket that's not well thought out, I can't also put a cap on it because I don't even know the scope of what I'm assigning you. Like, I know it's stupid. And on the reverse, you have these product managers who are always giving you these tickets, right? As an engineer, they don't know the scope and they go, oh, why does it take so long to add this button? And you're like, well, you don't understand the application. So I'm knowing that what I don't know, I don't really apply the deadlines. And does that always work? I don't think it's better or worse than I don't think the work's going to get done any faster
Yeah,
if I gave them a deadline. You know what I'm saying? Like we give deadlines when things get out of hand. Like, maybe there's a project we have now that's, 6 weeks going on. It's like, okay, what can I do to get this done in the next 2 weeks? Right. Can we reduce the scope? Is that agreeable? Okay, let's get it done. But I don't know. I also don't have time to I'm still a very productive hands-on person right at this stage in the company. So
yeah.
it's like the less time managing. So
What's the funniest thing you've seen a developer do while testing?
the funniest thing I've seen them do while testing.
Because you must get so many videos, right, for debugging or whatnot.
Oh yeah. When we were doing the developer experience testing, people would oh man, they would just it was like a Call of Duty lobby sometimes where these people were so mean.
Oh wow.
Like they would just and it's fun because it's an opportunity. I mean, they want feedback and they would just be so passionate about and so mean. And that actually reminds me of another thing too. Like in the early days of Dashcam, we posted on Reddit and we said, "Hey, here's Dashcam." And we got this comment that was like an itemized list of every reason they wouldn't use it. It was like 12 reasons. And it was hurtful because it was very early. But then I flipped my brain and I was like, well, this guy, first of all, this random person is passionate enough to
Yeah, right.
list all these things, right? To engage. And here's our roadmap for the next 2 months. It's like, let's just fix these 12 things. And it was like privacy concerns and crashing and cross compatibility. And I wanted to have log files and all these. And we did it and it worked. And that was like an early, that was like V0 of the product feedback cycle.
Did he respond after the update?
Oh, I actually I don't think we ever replied to him. That's funny. We should have engaged with that guy. Yeah, I don't think we ever even updated. We never even. I think they looked at the marketing site and were like, "We're not going to do this." Like this is. I don't trust you guys or whatever.
Hmm. Got it.
We launched it without any. Like what we learned was like obviously developers are extremely privacy focused and they don't want to have something recording them in the background or recording keys, things like that. So we spent a lot of time on privacy of like, hiding keys or like making it very apparent when things are being recorded, signing all the certificates we can to make sure that nothing pops up, making it really performant. That was a big one. It was like, is this going to kill my laptop battery? So we just spent all this time making it really efficient. And again, going back to what we're doing now with TestDriver, like all of that paid off because now you're working on a VM that has no, it doesn't have the same CPU as a desktop. It doesn't have RAM. It's like shared space. So all that efficiency stuff we did is paying off.
Hmm. Interesting.
Yeah.
Where can people sign up for Test Driver?
Yeah. So the website is TestDriver.AI and you can go there, sign up and enter in your URL or your EXE and we'll reply back with a bunch of tests for you and deploy them and get started.
Thanks so much for taking the time. It was a fun conversation, and I'm glad I got to speak to you and record this.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me on. I'm glad we got to make the time to do it.
Thanks. If you found this valuable, you can subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or whatever your favorite podcast app is. See you in the next